My name is Dr. Nick Chartres, and I'm from the Program on Reproductive Health and the Environment at UCSF. In the 40 years between enactment of the original Toxic Substances Control Act in 1976 and its 2016 amendments, EPA regulated less than 1% of the existing chemicals on the market. EPA was even unable to ban cancer-causing chemicals like asbestos, which was part of the reason why Congress updated TSCA to make it easier for regulators to ban or restrict harmful chemicals and protect public health. To determine if a chemical poses an unreasonable risk, amended TSCA requires EPA to evaluate existing chemicals using the best available science and account for risks to potentially exposed or susceptible subpopulations, including children, pregnant people, and workers, without considering costs. And while the 2016 amendments were a significant update, many critical implementation decisions, including how to assess and apply the best available science, were left to EPA to determine, and therefore making it vulnerable to political interference and scientific integrity concerns. PRHE and our partners analysed what's gone wrong with the implementation of TSCA in a paper published in Environmental Science and Technology. We compare the first 10 risk evaluations completed under amended TSCA to the best available science. We found EPA's risk evaluations systematically underestimated human health risks of chemical exposures, particularly to vulnerable populations, by excluding conditions of use and exposure pathways, not considering aggregate exposure and cumulative risk. And I encourage you to look at this figure after today's presentation to see how EPA considers single exposure pathways in their assessments, not identifying all potentially exposed or susceptible subpopulations, not addressing data gaps, and using a flawed systematic review method to evaluate the evidence. And again, I encourage you to look at the figure and see how EPA fails to adhere to best practice across each step of the systematic review approach. We discussed the public health implications and recommendations for each area that EPA is falling short on. And these include EPA should revise its first 10 risk evaluations to incorporate all conditions of use and include exposure pathways within jurisdiction of other EPA statutes. EPA should combine quantitative exposure estimates across exposure pathways and settings and assess impacts of exposure to multiple chemical mixtures and structural drivers of health. They should explicitly name what qualifies populations as susceptible in its risk evaluations and prepare a comprehensive methodology to identify them and quantify their risk consistently within and across risk evaluations. EPA must apply its reporting and testing authorities to require chemical manufacturers to provide the data, including toxicity studies, necessary to perform its risk evaluations. And it should adhere to the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine recommendations and implement a systematic review method compatible with empirically based existing methods. Failing to remedy these shortcomings will result in continued systematic underestimation of risk for all chemicals. Advantages of corrections to the risk evaluations must be balanced against the disadvantages of further delays in issuing risk management rules to address unreasonable risk. Thank you very much.